live?
Crisis averted.
Excellent. It's Monday, February 2nd. It's 6:01 p.m. I will call this meeting to order. We can stand for the Pledge of Allegiance, please. I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Can you roll call for us?
Yes. Steve Bigelow.
Here.
Corey Miller.
Here.
Ian McDonald.
Here.
Lori Belargin. Here. Bruce Belargin.
Here.
Danny Erickson. Here. And Matt Foucault.
Here. Our district mission, core values, protocol reminders are all listed on the agenda. If you can all just take a minute to review those, and when someone's ready, I'll take a motion to approve the agenda.
Motion approved.
A motion by Lori. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Steve. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. Item number 2 is public comment. I do have one request for public comment. Jacob Howell. Is it Howells?
Yes.
Jacob Howells?
But we'll hold off on that just a little bit.
Oh, you wanna wait?
because it's technically connected to the first agenda item on the petition. So I'll introduce the information on the petition, then invite Jacob and Molly up to make their comments.
Perfect.
Okay. All right, so it is that time of the year when families that are interested in detaching property, that conversation begins now. And Jacob and Molly Howells, they submitted a petition to detach property that's currently part of the Somerset School District and attached to the Hudson School District. So that starts with us here, the detaching district. The information, if, Jessica, if you want to bring up that document up there. So we're going to look first at the actual petition. It's called paperwork. It's the linked document there. This describes the information, describes the parcel, and the specifics of the property. And if I say anything that's incorrect, feel free to correct me, but I believe at this point, not living at the property, but looking at building on that property.
Correct.
Okay, good, nailed it. And then there's the financial information on there, but now we're gonna take a look at the map, because that's often one of the most interesting parts. So you know the district boundaries all around Somerset are jagged. There's a lot of ins and outs, and so this is showing that north-south boundary between the school district of Hudson and the school district of Somerset. That rectangular parcel that is outlined in blue, that's in that maroon color, that's Somerset, and you can see the property that we're discussing is that rectangle right there. So that's the basics of the petition. The process would be, it starts here. We'll bring this back at the next meeting for action for an official position that the board will take. Depending on what happens there, it would go to Hudson and the process would continue. So with that, I'll invite Jacob and Molly to come on up and talk about their petition.
Sure. Yeah, my name's Jake, this is Molly, and I first want to say thanks for taking the time to consider our petition. I know you guys have plenty to do, but a couple points we made, and we wrote a letter, and this is in a lot of details in the letter, but just to kind of reiterate some of these points. I'll start with the map since it's up there. I think logistically, you can kind of see where the land is located. The land that's here, this is all family-owned land, the Dalton family farmland, and this is all cornfields. And so you would access our property through Heritage Trail here. Our driveway would come right off of this cul-de-sac, and it's the easement that would come into here. So this is obviously Hudson School District. We wouldn't be a part of the neighborhood, but we would connect into that neighborhood from our property. And then, you know, the second part of it, outside of the logistics, is our oldest son, Jonah. He has convergence insufficiency in his eyes. And so what we've learned, he's in 4th grade, and so what we've learned is that a typical school day for him can be a challenge. He gets bad headaches, and you know, he has, he can just struggle at times. And so one of our goals is that to be able to just create some options for us. You know, and currently we open enroll, and so to have the place where we live as part of Hudson School District, he's fully connected into Hudson outside of school, scouts, sports, things like that. And so we're just trying to bring those two things together just knowing that he might not take the typical route in middle school and high school in a classroom 7 hours a day. And so we feel like if we don't have to open enroll, if we live in district, it would just create some security there for us as we're trying to navigate what would be best for Jonah in figuring out, you know, how to help him succeed. And really, I think those are kind of, there's not much else there. So anything?
No, and we're open to getting you any more information that you have questions around, whether it's around the location of the property or have questions around the services that we'd be looking into for Hudson specific. It's nothing against Somerset, it's that we're there currently and wanting to continue our education there. So, but we're open to getting you anything that you need for further explanation.
Thank you very much. Yeah, we all have that, we all got a copy of the letter, so we won't take any action tonight. Like Dr. Barrow said, it'll come back in 2 weeks.
Okay,
But in the next 2 weeks, I mean, you have all of our emails.
okay,
Feel free to provide any you like, and if anybody has questions, please reach out.
yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you very much, appreciate it.
Dave, can I just ask, so if the student did come to Somerset with that, would we be offering the additional services to Somerset or by Somerset?
So obviously, we'd have to look at, we'd have to look at the individual circumstances, but certainly we would be able to offer the accommodations necessary here. Yep.
And can't remember currently, but you have been to Hudson, or he's going currently to
He's
Hudson?
currently
You're
open
gonna-
enrolled at Holton.
Holt, that's right, yeah,
Yeah.
Holt's great at Holton. That's right.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
So you don't live in the district now either?
No, currently open enrolled.
Any other questions at all for
Have-
anybody?
Are you, is this like a new build? Have you
It is.
purchased this property?
Yeah, we own it
You
currently.
do, okay.
Yeah.
We moved back this area to build on there, so we're in between homes, and that's why they're open enrolled right now. Thank you.
Anything else from anyone? Okay, thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Yep. Item number 4, Baker Tilly audit presentation. Anything you want to start with?
No, we're excited to have Baker Tilly here to present. You know, the audit is an important part of the financial oversight process, and Rod worked closely with all of the folks from Baker Tilly to get them all the information. It's a heavy lift for the finance department and an important process. We want to make sure that the board and the community can have a quick overview of what that process looks like and what the outcomes were.
Great. Well, thank you for having me. This is my second year presenting here, so appreciate the opportunity to come and talk with you tonight. My name is Sheann Hediger. I'm the principal. It's kind of a fun title when I go to those school districts, but I am the principal with Baker Tilly out of our Eau Claire office, overseeing the district's audit. We did issue 2 reports back in December ahead of the DPI deadline. Actually, no, back in November, just let me know wrong. So yes, we issued the financial statements and the reporting and insights from the audit. So you've probably received copies of those previously. Financial statements is a little bit bigger one, reporting and insights has the pretty blue cover. And then just last week, we issued the report on federal and state awards. And I think Rod just distributed that copy today, and we have your finals. So I will briefly cover all 3 of those reports tonight. And then I'll review that financial highlights 2-page document that was also distributed. If you have questions as I'm going along, feel free to interrupt me, or if you want to wait till the end, that's totally fine as well.
A short one?
Yeah, next one.
I'll start out with the financial statements, so you don't need the handout quite yet.
Yeah.
We did issue an unmodified opinion for fiscal 2025. That is the highest opinion that the district can receive. And what that means is we found the financial statements to be fairly presented in accordance with accounting principles generally accepted in the United States. Sounds real high level. Basically, we plan and perform our audit to obtain a reasonable assurance that the financials are free from material misstatement. Reasonable is a high level of assurance. It's not absolute. We're not looking at every transaction. We'd be here for months and you would incur a lot higher audit fees. So what we do is sample transactions. We set materiality thresholds, we review the internal controls of the district, identify any risk areas, and focus our procedures there. In general, the district is a very, standard organization compared to other Wisconsin school districts. The operations are fairly regulated, so nothing specific sticks out as a risk to the district that other districts wouldn't face as well. We form and express our opinion after performing our procedures, and that's ultimately what gets put into your financial statements. So the first 3 pages of the financial statement document is that opinion. It does describe the auditor's responsibilities and management responsibilities in more detail. A couple high levels of the management responsibility and you as the board, your responsibilities. Management is responsible for preparing the financials. The district does hire us as the auditors to prepare them. It's a very common thing. But ultimately, the district reviews the financials in draft and takes responsibility for those. Management is also responsible for designing and implementing those internal controls over financial reporting, and then providing us, unrestricted access to the information. And then you as the board are responsible for overseeing the financial reporting process. You're setting a positive tone for your management, and then informing us about any fraud or suspected fraud. So we do speak with a board member each year and go over some fraud risks and just ask if you're aware of anything. So that covers that piece of it. And I just want to briefly go over some of the reporting and insights from the audit. This letter, if you haven't read, is kind of our communication to you, a recap of how the audit went, outlines what our procedures were. Again, our responsibilities are listed in there. We do cover any internal control matters, so any material weaknesses or significant deficiencies over financial reporting. Those are detailed on page 6 of this letter, and these would be the same as they have been. The first being, we do report inadequate segregation of duties, and really just one area that we've identified there is controls over payroll, that the person preparing payroll should not also have access to other personnel duties, changing pay rates or adding an employee. So sometimes that's just not feasible with accounting softwares or the people that you have in place. They need to be able to do those things. So we point these out to let you know this is the case with your district, but you may have other compensating controls in place, reviews of the administrator or the finance heads. So just making you aware that does exist. The second material weakness then is the financial statement close process. So as I mentioned before, we as your auditors prepare the financial statement document. Under auditing standards, we are required to report that as a material weakness. The alternative to that is having a CPA on staff that keeps up with all of the accounting guidance, any new changes to reporting. Quite rare to see. I don't have many clients that have the ability to prepare their own financial statements in accordance with the government accounting standards and GAAP in general. Those are those things. And then starting on page 8 of that letter, we have our required communications. So a few things to note here. For fiscal 25, there was one new accounting standard implemented, GASB 101, related to compensated absences. It really looked at that liability that you're reporting on the government-wide statements, so nothing that you're paying out frequently. But, you know, any benefits that people are accruing for retirement, if you do a payout, but also looking now at if you carry over any time off, or any PTO type things, that now gets put into the liability where it never used to be. So just a change in how that, those policies are looked at. It did not result in any material changes to the financial statements. We evaluated the policies with Rod and updated any reporting as needed. The significant accounting estimates that we've identified within the financials, the net pension liability and related deferrals as it relates to the Wisconsin retirement system, the net OPEB liability and related deferrals for your other post-employment benefits that are accounted for in Fund 73, and then depreciation over your capital assets. We found all of those to be reasonable in any inputs and no bias noted on those estimates. If there were any significant or unusual transactions, any difficulties encountered with the audit, any disagreements with management or consultations outside of our audit team, we would notify you of those. Those are all sections within this, and happy to report we did not encounter any of those situations, so the letter reflects that as well. We did not have other audit findings or issues that required additional communication. Let's see. No compliance issues with laws and regulations. We'll go over the single audit report here in a minute to talk about any findings regarding the grant programs. But we did not identify any fraud, and we are independent of the district and did not have any significant related parties noted. So, again, those couple pages, a lot of information there. We've also got on page 12 some Board of Education resources. There is a link to our website. You know, we stay on top of hot topics impacting local governments, including schools, you know, but also if you're on any county boards or city councils and such, kind of non-financial or non-audit issues. We do have some resources there if there were ever additional services requested that Baker Tilly could assist with. And then finally, we have page 26 through the end, through 28, is our two-way audit communications. This is for our next year's audit. It's kind of our planning communications to you, so it goes over the nature, scope, and timing of our audit, you know, what we intend to be doing in our audit procedures. It also has a list of questions and for you to think about, look at, if you would have any suspicions of fraud or issues that you would want us as the auditors to look into. We're happy to take those notes. We can have confidential conversations, but things to think about. So my contact information is on the first page of this letter, including my email and phone number. So again, if anything came up during the year, you don't have to wait for this meeting or during the audit to talk with us.
Is that what you're referring to? Is that the book?
It's good, yeah, this is.
Okay.
Yeah.
My pages were off a little bit from what you gave us, is all we had in front of us, so
Okay.
I have that though.
Yes, this was the blue colored book.
Okay, and everybody has a copy of that? Okay, very good.
Yeah.
Yeah, a couple weeks ago?
Back in December.
Yeah, okay. Okay, very good.
All right, now I will go over the one that was just handed out today, the report on federal and state awards. Just briefly, page 9 of this is basically the recap of everything that's in this report. It's the schedule of findings and question costs. So just going down this, the first thing there, the report that the auditor issued. refers to that financial statement opinion that I mentioned, that unmodified opinion. So again, that was the highest level you can achieve. And then this talks about the internal controls. I mentioned those material weaknesses being financial statement reporting and the payroll issue. We did not note any significant deficiencies and no material non-compliance related to financial statements. Then the next section is over the federal and state awards. So we do follow the uniform guidance and the state single audit guidelines. It's very prescribed audit program that we have to go through to identify what major programs need to be selected, and then the procedures that we do over those. So you see at the bottom are the 4 programs that we tested this year. On the federal side, the Medicaid clusters, the school-based services is what that one is, and then the child nutrition cluster. And then for state programs, we looked at the general equalization aids and the special ed program. So through that, so we did not have any material weaknesses identified or the controls of overcompliance. We did have two significant deficiencies, one over the Medicaid program and one over the special ed program. Both of those relate to basically having adequate review controls. The Medicaid one, so the SBS monies, there was not review over the quarterly financial reports happening towards the beginning of fiscal '25. I think by the end of the year, we found that those were being reviewed by somebody other than the person preparing. But because we had during the year it not happening on all of them, we did have to report that. The finding over the special ed program related to a staff that was hired during the year. Their costs were charged to special ed, but they did not have the proper license. So DPI does require that to be reported as a finding, but those costs were corrected on the special ed reporting. So, I mean, ultimately the district is not getting aided for anything that they should not, but because of how it was initially recorded, we do have to point that out to DPI. But we did, our opinion over the compliance for federal and state awards was also unmodified, so we did not find any severe non-compliance with the programs. And as Rod and I were just talking, so the dollar threshold for the single audit for 2025 was $750,000 on the federal side. For fiscal '26, that number has increased to $1 million. And looking at the federal awards for fiscal '25, you guys were at about $863,000. So potentially, if your funding stays at a similar level, you won't have this report for next year, for your current fiscal year. So that is that one, and that has been submitted to DPI now, so they are happy with that as of today. All right, the final then, just going over this handout. I'm going to kind of skip over the first half of the page because I've basically talked about all of that already in the auditor and management responsibilities. So looking at some of the numbers of your financials, starting out with the general fund balance, that is one of the most important metrics within your financial statements. Having an adequate fund balance allows for flexibility of spending, allows for timing differences of when revenues come in, still having kind of a pot to pull from before that money comes. So the details of the general fund balance, it can be in up to 5 different categories. At the end of '25, the district has only these 2 categories. So the non-spendable are amounts that, as it says, are in a non-spendable format. So that $24,000 is prepaid expenses. So you've already given the money out, it just hasn't been recognized until the next year. And then the remaining is unassigned, so that's your residual positive fund balance of 4.5 million. And that's really what's available to be spent, what you can use for future district costs. So I mentioned the adequacy of it, that's what goes down here at the end, on the bottom of this page. So we like to compare that fund balance, that available amount, to your general fund expenditures for the year, to kind of identify how much do you have on hand had you not gotten any revenues in fiscal '26. So you have about 25% of your expenditures on hand at year end. So that equates to about 3 months worth. The GFOA recommendation is a minimum of 2 months, so district has, you know, a 3-year trend has been above that minimum amount, so I would say an adequate fund balance. And really, you know, in line with, I think, where a lot of districts are. You don't want to keep too much on hand, and then you have people wondering why they're paying their taxes. And then you've also got other funds that have money set aside for specific expenditures. All right, on the next side of that, next page, the first section here looks at the general fund income statement, so how we came to the end of the change to fund balance for the year. The first column is the budget, so you had planned for a net loss of about $158,000. Compared to actual loss was just over $20,000. So you did perform better than expected or better than planned for. Looking at, you know, the revenues budget to actual comparison, you're about $284,000 over budget. A large part of that was just investment or interest income. That was about $155,000 of the overage. So, you know, obviously that money's hard to plan for, hard to know what it will be by year end, but nice to be over budget in that area. And then state revenue income were about $123,000 over budget by year end. On the expenditure side, the expenses were about $146,000 over budget. If you look at this page 38 that's referenced for the financial statements, there is a more detailed breakdown, but the general fund expenditures only were about $186,000 under budget. But then you have the transfer to the special ed fund to subsidize those operations, and that was about $332,000 over what you budgeted. And then we have the 2024 actual column just for reference there. The next section's down then. I want to first point out that the headings change here. It's now a 3-year trend looking, 25, 24, and 23. I usually confuse people with that because the budget was at the top. So, looking at cash and investments for all funds, you can see total cash for the district, you know, decreased about $15 million from 24 to 25. Large part of that is the restricted, which is your bond proceeds for the referendum project being spent down. The unrestricted cash did increase just under $2 million. Majority of that is in the debt service fund. You collected the prior year levy, and then the current year levy was more than the debt service, but I think you're levying as prescribed within the bond documents for that referendum issuance. So not a surprise, I guess, that cash balance is up until you make debt payments. Then the post-employment benefit trust, that's the trusted monies available for future post-employment benefits. And the pupil activity is monies that are not the district. It's for your student clubs or your classes and such, but it's held in the district's name. Okay, so then moving on, I mentioned you have, you know, those various other funds that are set aside for specific purposes. The special revenue funds consist of the special revenue trust, your food service operations, and the community service all of those fairly steady year over year, the usual activities happening in there. The debt service fund did increase about $1 million. As I mentioned, your levy did go up, so the levy exceeded the debt service by about $1 million, hence that increase in fund balance there. And then the capital project funds is your referendum project. We had about $15.7 million of expenditures over the projects in 2025, resulting in that decrease of the fund balance. And then my last section here is just looking at the debt. You look at your outstanding general obligation debt at the end of fiscal '25, just over $46 million, compared to the district's debt capacity of $172 million. So you've used about 27% of your debt limit. You know, if you needed to borrow, you have capacity there. And you know, looking at the 3-year trend, it's a little up and down, but as you're making debt payments, that will continue to go down. If you issue more debt, that will go up. But you can see that the debt capacity has increased significantly year over year. So basically your taxable property market value is increasing nicely. Then the last one there is looking at the percentage of your debt service compared to other non-capital expenditures. So of your pool of expense, how much is debt service, how much is principal and interest? Sitting at just over 12% for 2025. The graph there at the bottom shows the red line being bond rating agencies. This is one of the metrics they look at for rating bonds. They want to see that being a maximum of 20%. So the district, again, there for the 3-year trend, has been nicely below that 20%. So that's a good result to have. So that is the end of my prepared remarks. I do want to just give a really big thank you to Rod and the team. As mentioned, we're kind of disruptive. We ask a lot of questions, we look for a lot of support, and you know, being kind of a transition year for your staff as well, we didn't feel any of that. I think everybody was very well prepared, very responsive, cooperative through the process. So really appreciate that.
Thank you. How often do you do this, that full audit?
Annually.
Every year?
Yep.
Okay, and when will you start again then?
End of July, beginning of August.
That's your kind of your kickoff date?
Yep. Yeah, and I will say normally this report on federal and state awards would be issued at the same time as the financial statements. For this year, the compliance supplement that we have to follow was delayed by the federal government, the shutdown and other things. So that just came out the first week of December, and so we couldn't finish that audit quickly enough to meet the December 15th financial statement deadline.
Okay. Just looking at this 2-page document, what's the percent of debt limit? So we're sitting at that 26%,
Yep.
2025 budget. What's the average nationally? Is there, I mean, can you speak to that at all?
I think it can be all over. You know, I usually say if you're at, you know, over 50%, that's probably not great. Unless you have debt for some reason that you have a clear plan of how you're paying it off. Typically, you know, it really depends on the capital projects that you have. There's places that have 2% of their debt capacity, but they probably have some really aging infrastructure and buildings. And so knowing that, you know, you're in the middle of a project, you have a larger bond issue out right now, sitting at 26, 27% is just fine.
And then my other question, you mentioned early on about kind of the hot topic item for school boards, transparency, right? Do you look at how transparent we are to the public with this stuff? Do you issue a finding on that at all, or do you have an opinion?
No, we don't. You know, there's some laws and regulations that DPI puts out that we need to look at, but it's much more financial reporting based. though we do look at your board minutes, we look at what you're approving, that helps through our audit procedures too. Having open meetings is a requirement, so we do look at that, making sure you're doing that. Budgeting process, making sure you've, put the notice in the paper soon enough to then have your meetings. So there's a little bit of it, but
Anybody have any other questions?
On budgeting, we're looking at changing that up this year and being more proactive. Is there any topics there that you look at during the budget process?
like I said, we look at the budget document, making sure it was submitted to DPI timely, that you did your meetings as prescribed compared to publication dates. I mean, as far as the process for budgeting.
Or like, financial guidelines around like, do you budget right up to the dollar, do you leave any cushion, that type of thing, the basics?
Yeah, that really doesn't fall in the audit scope, but we have resources that I could point you to if needed around more detailed budgeting.
Okay.
The Government Finance Officers Association, the GFOA, has resources, that's a good one to start with. I would imagine DPI has some information on their website too, but.
Thanks.
Anything you want to add?
Just thank you, Shan, appreciate the time, and Matt, your question about transparency, that's really one of the reasons we want to bring this report forward publicly, because as Shan mentioned, they are independent from the district, so everything they're sharing, they're not sharing our information, they're sharing their findings based on what we provided, and I think it's important for everyone to see that we're in a good financial situation, that our procedures and our processes are solid. There's a few areas that have been identified that for the most part have already been rectified, but we'll continue to make sure that we're in a good, solid place there. So appreciate the partnership very much.
Great, thank you very much.
Thank you.
And then, Corey, really good segue, because you talked about some of the more proactive budgeting stuff. So next on the agenda, we have Rod's gonna talk about budgeting updates, and the work he's doing is very much on that proactive side, how we can get a little ahead of the scope. So this is, I think this would be the third presentation that's related to the budgeting process, and we said that especially once winter hit, that we wanted to be more regularly bringing you information, so when we get to the point of authorizing and approving a budget, it's not the first time you saw it. So with that, I'll turn it over to Rod.
Jessica, you could go with that first one. So I'm gonna get a little bit into the weeds tonight. I'm gonna try to give you guys a little education and then try to bring it back around to kind of show you why we are where we are with our budget. So I'm gonna start off with a little bit of history lesson here. Showing you this document here. This kind of shows what the revenue limit has been for the last 15 to 17 years from 2008 through 2027. So if you look at that blue line, that shows where the revenue limit has been. That's how much the state has allowed us to spend. The black or grayish line there, that is what the CPI index has been over that same time. So if you look at that, you can see that the difference between what the revenue limit has been and what CPI is currently $3,571 short, keeping up with consumer price index. So at one point, the revenue limit was supposed to be tied with CPI. They did that for a number of years, but as you can see, last 15 plus years, they haven't done that. So that's kind of why school districts around the state are kind of in a bind. If we were to have that extra $3,500 per student this year, that would add a little over $5,000 to the budget. I just kind of shudder to think what we could do with an extra.
How many?
5 million. This is what we could do with that. And if we look at how we've been deferring maintenance, because we just don't have the money to do it, that'd go a long ways to fixing some of those issues. And I'd be willing to bet that these last two referendums that we've had to do, they would have been significantly smaller, because a lot of the money in the referendum was to fix items that hadn't been fixed in the past. So if we would have been able to keep up with this model here, we'd be in a much better situation, but because we haven't, I'll kind of talk about what it looks like today.
And is it accurate to interpret CPI as basically inflation or other factors?
Yep, that's just the inflation rate.
Yeah.
Yep. Let's see. So at this point, we don't have much of the areas of the budget that we can cut and make a significant difference other than cutting staff like we did a few years ago. Like a few years ago, we cut 1.4 million from the budget. As of right now, we're not at the point, I think, where we need to cut staff, but we're getting close to that point if we don't make some changes. Most of the things that make up the majority of our budget right now are kind of fixed costs, or costs that we have very little control over, and that we see continue to rise. As most of you are aware, staffing makes up about 80% of our current budget. And I think it's important that we continue to pay a competitive wage to our staff and keep on trying to find ways to compensate our staff, especially as this budget cycle continues to get tighter and tighter. I think most of you are on board with that, Barry. Health insurance is another one of our huge expenses. Last year it increased 6.27%. This year we're projecting it could be anywhere up to 9%. And that adds about 1.9 billion to the budget for this upcoming year. Utilities is another huge expense for us: natural gas, electricity, fuel oil. You know, that varies by how climate is. This past couple of weeks is going to be adding quite a bit to this year's budget with that cold snap. Dean was talking to us about how much fuel oil they've been using up, as they are constantly having to use fuel oil to keep the school heated down there. And if you guys own a car or a house, I'm sure you've seen the increases in your insurance prices over the last couple of years, and the same is true for school districts. It continues to rise at a pretty significant rate. Workers' compensation is also a huge expense that we don't have any control over. And we do have one significant injury from last year. And we just got notified last week from our insurance company that our rates for workers' comp are gonna go up significantly for next year because of that one significant injury. As we've talked about before, snow removal is another big one. We've been lucky the past few years, but we haven't had to dip into that very much, but as you've known this year, we've been having a lot of these little snowfalls, and we're already spent twice as much as we did last year, and that's just through the end of December. We haven't even factored in January yet. And as we talked quite a bit before, maintenance is another huge area of concern. You know, if we've talked about it, we talked about maintenance and establishing a maintenance schedule. We're starting this Fund 46 so we can put some money away and have a maintenance schedule that we can try to get some of this stuff done. But as you can see, it's hard to address putting money away when we have a deficit budget and the lack of funding each year. But we've been lucky that with these last two referendums I've just mentioned, it's helped us get some of that deferred maintenance items covered. So we're kind of in a good spot, but we'd be in a really tough spot if we didn't have these past two referendums. So I think I've kind of made my point. Revenue has not kept up with inflation for a very long time. We continue to cut expenses where we can, and we're kind of running out of good options to cut expenses that will make a significant difference. When we're looking for expenses to cut right now, we're trying to focus on keeping those cuts out of the classroom and for things that don't affect that as much as possible. And I think this information is gonna help you better understand budget projections I'm about to show you. But before I get started, let me just say this is a very high level, very early projections. We'll continue to refine these throughout the year and we get more information. This is the second year of our biennium, so we know most of the information from the state. So it's not just dialing in our expenses here that as we get closer to the end of the year. One thing that could be an impact on next year's budget is that the state just announced that they have a $2 billion surplus. And there's a movement to fix the special education shortfall that we talked about at the January work session. I don't think they're gonna do anything to fix this year's shortage, but there's some talk about potentially making next year's fixed, and if they can do that, it's gonna be a huge movement towards reducing that deficit budget that we show there. If they can get it closer to the 45% that they promised, it would pretty much wipe out that $200,000 right there. So the same as last year, districts are allowed to increase revenue limit by $325 per student. You may even remember that back in October. That was a discussion that we had. But just keep in mind that this $325 increase that we're getting, that's only about a 2% increase to our revenue. Whereas right now they're projecting CPI to be around 2.8%. So again, it's not keeping up with inflation. I checked what we spent last year, the 24-25 school year. We increased our expenses by 3.9%. So with a 2% increase in revenue, and we spent a 4% increase in expenses. And actually, we did pretty good if we look at the state average. The state average was 6.69% increase in expenses over all the school districts in the state. So we're doing pretty good.
Just for 24-25?
Yeah. So as you can see, it's kind of tough to balance a budget when revenue doesn't keep up with CPI. And like I mentioned last year, we had the $325 per student increase to the revenue limit. I think once again, that's going to be funded entirely by the local taxpayers. But the good news is if we look up here on the graph, last year, we're at line, towards second from the bottom, the total school-based tax levy, we had, that was at $12,735,000. Even if we go to the max of that $325, we're still a little bit lower than what we taxed last year. And mill rate comes down slightly because of that.
Is that 697?
Yep, 697. So that was a big concern for me last year when we, at the October meeting, is what's it gonna look like this year if we have to go to the taxpayers for that $325 increase again. But because it looks like, as of right now, where it's looking like the state's gonna fund more of the revenue limit than they did last year, so that's gonna help lower our taxpayers.
Just want to make sure I'm tracking.
Yep.
Looking at that increase of $325 in the revenue limit, right? So on someone's tax bill, you'd actually see the amount you're paying in taxes go up, but based on the mill rate, your overall tax bill is actually going to drop, correct?
Yep, slightly.
Levy more money, but actually going to cost each taxpayer
Less money.
14 cents less.
Yep. So if we're looking at this is the 3-year comparison. So the 24-25 is the numbers final numbers that came in for last year. A lot of the numbers that Sheehan was talking about that we just got audited for. The blue numbers there are the current numbers that we had budgeted for at the October 20th meeting that you guys approved. And then the far right column is what the numbers are currently looking like. And that's projecting a $209,000 deficit budget. And some of those numbers that kind of make up that budget, that's assuming that we do, like I said, the $325 per pupil revenue limit increase. It's assuming a 2.8% salary increase. Last year we did 3% to the salary schedule plus 1.5 to the lane. So last year we did 4.5%. So this is almost 2 percentage points less than last year. This is assuming that most of the expenses that we don't have control over, increasing by the 2.8% CPI, assuming a 9% increase for health insurance. And the last factor is that enrollment drops slightly. If you look at the enrollment numbers up there, we're at 1396 coming into this school year, and I'm dropping that down to 1381. And that's considered FTE, that's full-time equivalency. If you look at butts in the seats is what they say, it's a lot higher than that. But because most of that difference is because of our JK, we only can count those at a 0.6 instead of a 0.1 because we're only here for part of the day. So that's
Is the decrease because we are graduating more kids than we have coming in?
That's the main thing that's happening, yes.
'Cause, you know, as we talked about the last meeting, we're technically up a few kids, like 3, from year beginning to year end.
Right.
But we're still graduating more than we're bringing in, so that overall is still declining enrollment. Yep.
Let me ask this question, Ron. So if you were to increase this, given those numbers up there, 1381, if we increase it by 20 next year for whatever reason, what difference would that make with our budget?
It doesn't do a whole lot because they take a 3-year average, is how DPI calculates it. So it would probably, if you take it over the 3-year average, it probably adds like 5 to 6 kids. So it might be $30,000 to $40,000. But that's kind of been the trend, as we're trending down, so I'm making it conservative and assuming we're gonna lose students this year.
The more direct impact is it does shift the burden more to the state.
Yes.
So it won't, the impact on the limit won't be as profound as the shift between state and local responsibilities.
Got it.
So if we look at the Fund 10 revenues, the difference between the current year and what I'm forecasting, it's about an increase of $500,000 in revenue. And that's basically the $325 times the 1,381 kids we're looking at. Expenses go up by about $722,000. Most of that is from a projected salary increase and then the increase on most of the expenses at that 2.8%. So at this point, if we were to, this $209,000 deficit budget is what we had to look at, I think we're still at a healthy level. We still have almost $4.7 million in fund balance. It's still a very healthy balance. It's still 21%. So I think we could survive 1 year with a deficit budget like that. The only problem is if we look at what next year is looking like, that's closer to a $600,000 deficit going forward, and that's not something I don't think we can sustain through fund balance. So that's where I think we need to have the discussion that we need to start having some discussions about going to an operational referendum for the 27-28 school year.
So I got a question for you. I know Corey's brought this up many times, but how much do we spend on curriculum?
That I would have to take a look at.
Yes, I wouldn't hold you to it, but.
It's less than $200,000 a year, less than, the last couple of years have been less than a percentage of the overall budget. So 0.91, I think, was the 3-year rolling average for the percent that is for curricular resources of the total budget.
Do we think there's any way to save there?
No. I would argue the opposite, actually. I believe we're underspending in resources for student learning. There's a lot of research that suggests high-quality learning resources has a profound impact on student learning, and as we strive for excellence, cutting what we bring to our kids for their learning, I think would be the last thing we want to do.
Yeah, I'm just asking, 'cause
Yeah, no, it's a good question. It's
Yeah.
because all, like, you know, Rod brought up a lot of the things like fuel oil. We don't have a choice. We have a deal where we'll interrupt our service if there's a high demand. Now, fuel oil is super expensive, so that might not even be worth it, because we get a lower rate overall, might not be worth it in long run. So much of our budget is fixed expense that we just have very little control over. And 80% of our budget is staffing. And if we talk, even a 2.8% increase is very conservative, because that, as Rod said, does not include steps. So it's not a big increase for staff. We can only do that so long before it starts impacting recruitment and retention as well. But things, like, even when the district went through that significant cut, there were conversations, I'm sure, because I've been through this process in my previous district, where you say, well, maybe if we cut like supplies, it's such a small amount, it really doesn't make a difference. So we end up spending way more on stuff that people don't even think about, that just happens behind the scenes, and the stuff that's more visible that we think about actually isn't that much. The reason curriculum, I think what happens with curriculum is, and we'll present on this in probably 2 months or so, the work that Sarah's doing on the curriculum improvement process. That work is all cycled. And what we do is we look year by year and go, okay, like as an example, elementary English language arts is one of the most expensive implementations because there's a lot of stuff. But we do that once every 5 or 6 years. So we balance out, we look at, okay, make sure that we're not gonna do high school math and elementary literacy on the same year. It's all staggered through like a 5 to 6 year cycle. I say 5 to 6 because sometimes when you save money, you pause the renewals. But even that, so much of that is fixed, because if you're talking about digital resources, you pay annually no matter what. So even if you say, let's delay a year, that used to be if you delayed a year, that meant you're not buying new textbooks. That's a legitimate savings. Now with electronic resources, not so much.
How many different vendors are there for curriculum? I'm just trying to educate myself.
Yeah, so there used to be more actually. Now it depends on how you look at it. A lot of the big players, the big corporate producers, have bought out smaller companies, and that continues to happen. Like there'll be a small company that launches something and it's a really popular program, then a big company will come and snag that. Okay, that's a good resource, we want that. So we do a lot of our work with probably 4 or 5, but there are still a lot of smaller vendors, more niche vendors that will have specific resources, but a lot of it's controlled by probably 4 or 5 big ones.
So even the smaller ones would have a higher price tag too, or is it pretty competitive, or?
It really can, it can vary a lot. I'll give an example. There, and this would have been last year, the implementation of a new elementary literacy resource. Price was part of the consideration. It always is. I mean, there's always more you can do, right? There's always, like, you think about secondary science as an example. You could go all in on secondary science and spend so much with the different probes and resources and electronic stuff, that the data collection, there's a ton you could do. But you have to balance that. You gotta do a cost-benefit analysis. But a decision was specifically made to choose one elementary resource over another because we literally just couldn't afford one of them. So there is quite a bit of variability, and that's part of the consideration.
All right, thanks.
Yep.
So I'm guessing we have a lot of contracted services. Do we reviewing all of those?
Yes.
Guessing like your cleaning bus, whatever else you have, plowing, you bring up snow plow, I mean,
Yes.
all of those to get more RFPs again.
Yeah, exactly. And there's a little preview. It's connected, so we can talk about a little preview, but we're working on, I think I mentioned this, but a partnership with the village. They'll be helping out in the future to bring some of those costs down as well. Very happy with the partnership we have with the village. But yeah, contracted services, and it's a lot of money. A lot of money goes into those big contracted services, so we need to make sure we're always in a competitive situation
I
with those.
remember we recorded some of those interviews a few years ago when we updated. some of them, but
Yeah.
I think that's been 6 years now.
Yeah, I think it's time we look at this. Yep.
Rod, did you have more?
Oh, that was it. Do you guys have any more questions?
Other questions?
The question I have is, if I were trying to prioritize how much time and effort you put into cutting, which it sounds like is pretty tough, versus time and effort putting into raising more money, which is putting butts in seats, I would wanna know how many butts are available to know how much energy to put into it.
Sure, yeah.
Right? How do we get that? Is there a metric or is there any way to know?
It-
And then
that's-
if there's like, okay, they're out there, there's kids that we can pull back a good number,
Yeah.
let's, focus our resources there.
Yeah, that's a really good question. Actually, when we get into the superintendent's report, I'll talk a little bit about that with the rounding review, because some of that is sort of the marketing strategy that we're trying to build. I don't wanna say it's unlimited, because there's certainly a cap. You're not gonna draw open enrollment from Green Bay to come over here, so it's limited. However, open enrollment out is certainly our biggest area of concern. That's without a doubt our biggest area of concern. So we continue to strategize on how we can do that. Now, within there, though, you take open enrollment out, there's a number that's called capture rate. And right now, I don't know what that number is. We've looked at it, but we don't have it completely quantified. Capture rate suggests that these are all the kids that live in your boundaries. What percentage of those kids end up attending our public schools? There's a limit on that. Some families are going to choose parochial schools because they have firm beliefs, that's what they want. So there's nothing we're going to do to attract some of those. Some will choose homeschool, and that's what they're gonna choose because that's what they want to do no matter what. It's not that they're looking at us saying there's something wrong there, they're just saying, this is something that I would prefer for my family. So you have to figure out what that capture rate is, and we want to increase it with an understanding that that will be limited at some point. But then beyond capture rate is open enrollment in. So right now, we're net negative, meaning we lose more kids to open enrollment than we attract. We would want to, so first goal, get even. Second goal, attract more through open enrollment. But that gets to the question about investment. You need to invest in the supports and the systems and the resources and the programs that we have to attract kids in. So it is about finding that sweet
Or
spot.
figuring out what the perceptions are, what's driving perceptions.
Absolutely, yep, part of it too.
All right, thanks.
Yep, you bet.
I like that question because, we've got a lot of building going on in the area and, we're ripe for growth.
Yeah.
I would
Yeah,
think
well,
it's
all those
something we
metrics
can
are
do.
taking average formulas, and you have to look at what makes us unique.
Yes.
And it seems like there's a good rationale to say, we've got a bigger opportunity than most, given our location and growth rate. So how do we invest now, so 3 to 5 years, we're really capitalizing on it?
Yep. Yep, good questions, thank you.
Any other questions at all? Well, thanks for all the work. This is nice to have this so early. And I look forward to the next update. And let us know if there's anything we can do to support.
Will do, thank you.
Appreciate it, Rod, thank you very much.
Thanks, Rod.
Item number 6 is the WASB delegate report. And any comments from the WASB convention? Lori, you want to start, or?
You're gonna start with that, aren't you?
Yeah, well, Laura, do you want to start? Anything you want to say?
Well, I'll just start by thanking Lori for being the delegate. There's a lot of extra time. There were times that Matt and I were just socializing as Lori's in busy sessions doing the work of the delegate. So appreciate that. And it's a very interesting process. Not everyone would be as engaged as Lori is, so we appreciate that. We've had really good conversations about the resolutions. And then Lori did some work on the document that we shared last time. So maybe I'll turn it over to you, Lori, to share the document.
Well, I added the column about what the delegate assembly vote was. I highlighted in red the votes that did not agree with what the board had decided as a recommendation. There were not very many that did not go the way we wanted them to. Does anybody have any questions?
No.
Any some reasons or conversations that surprised you?
Um, I think the board, 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 I really, no.
When I look at the red ones, it's interesting because we had a lot of dialogue on all of those red ones. So you could see where maybe the vote went different than what we were saying, because even when we were talking about it, we realized there's two sides to it, but ultimately, I'll share like the school lunch one as an example. Everyone wants kids to be able to afford a school lunch, but our position was state funded for all to have free lunch, without new money going in could be a potential net negative to our families. So we understand the perspective that it sounds good, but there's more to it when you dig in.
Or do I talk about, oh, sorry.
What was some of the conversation on the delegate floor about the revisions to the school report card process?
They did, so you're talking about the second resolution number 2. They did amend the resolution to take out, include fiscal efficiency in the report card scoring. And so there was a lot of conversation about it, and with that taken out, the majority said yes.
So how is it supposed to help? What was the reasoning for how it's supposed to help improve?
The report
Well,
card one?
the big thing that a lot of people talk about is that they don't want changes, they want consistency. And so more people were looking at the big picture than at the things that we were concerned about that were going into the school report card.
Okay.
For example, when you equalize growth and where you are academically, your performance,
Yeah.
when you equalize that, you're really putting districts that have a high percentage of socioeconomically disadvantaged students at a disadvantage, because their growth score is not having as big of an impact as it should.
Yeah.
So it's, in our opinion, when we were discussing it here at the board level before we went to the convention, that's one of the reasons we said no to it.
If it were just, like, if it were clean and the resolution was consistency in the report card, that we lock it in and we say, you know what, we're gonna go no less than 7 years with generally the same metrics, I would've been 100% supportive of that, but the nuance in there, there's no perfect comparison. When you're trying to compare performance across all 421 districts in this, there's no perfect format, but there's always winners and losers when you make changes. It seemed that there wasn't enough dialogue around what would really be the best format to have apples to apples comparison. The more we can focus on achievement, I think the better off we are, because that's a more consistent measure than growth, which is volatile.
Yeah.
Lori, do you want to talk about any sessions at all that you went to?
Yes, one of them had to do with language arts. And it was put on by the Oshkosh area school district. It was called Improving Literacy Through School Community Partnerships. And one of the things they talked about was the curriculum that they moved to. And it's called Core Knowledge Language Arts, where a large percentage of the reading material is nonfiction. And so they're getting a lot of science and social studies information through the language arts curriculum. And it was the curriculum that our school district really, really, really wanted a year or two ago when at the elementary level. And we didn't get it because it was so expensive.
Yeah, that was part of it. Part of it also, so I have experience with this. We implemented this curriculum in my previous district. It's a heavy lift. I personally love it. I think there's a tremendous benefit with the nonfiction focus and the idea, the concept of core knowledge is that for every kid to be a well-informed citizen there's some basic knowledge that you need to have to be able just to speak intelligently about our world. So there's study behind this, and then the curriculum, and it was actually a nonprofit organization that came up with these, like what this core knowledge would be by grade level. They laid it out in a scope and sequence, and then created a curriculum with the readings and the activities that are linked to that core knowledge. And like Oshkosh, I'm sure, wasn't in the session, we talked a little bit about it, the interdisciplinary opportunities then to say, okay, like we're learning about the Roman Empire as an example. Then in art and music, you're exploring some of those same concepts. It really opens up a lot of opportunity for that work. So yeah, super interesting. That would be an example. And this is all actually backing up. Act 20, it didn't force, but certainly encourage districts to consider resources that were vetted and were aligned to the science of reading. The one that we chose absolutely is, so is Core Knowledge Language Arts, CKLA. So a lot of districts were in fact, probably all districts in the state were in this position of either evaluating what they currently had and determining if it was adequate or making changes. So a lot of districts made changes. In my experience, what I have found, the most impactful curricular resources tend to be the most difficult to implement. Because like a one-size-fits-all, like open to page 21 and do 1 to 39 odd is not gonna be the most effective, but it's gonna be the easiest to implement. There's always this push and pull about like how much capacity do we have to take something on that's that large. And that was, I'm talking to Sarah and talking to Pam and some teachers, that was part of the issue with CKLA. And it's not like that's the only good, our resource is very solid. I don't have an issue with our resource. I have more experience with CKLA just because I was involved more with that implementation.
Then another one I went to was building community support for tax levy transparency. Green Bay School District put it on. They're the first school district in the state that was able to get language added. You know, we got our property tax bills in December. They are the first school district in Wisconsin who actually have on their property tax bill of the amount levied by Green Bay area public schools, this amount of money is for the purpose of private school vouchers. So it makes it very transparent to our taxpayers how much money they're being levied in their property taxes to pay for private school vouchers. And right now, there are schools in our area that have already passed this or are in the process of it, including Superior, Ashland, Eau Claire, Menominee, and Chippewa Falls. And if we are going to have the opportunity to meet with the Village of Somerset and the Township of Somerset and have that group meeting, this is something that I think we should really look at pursuing to have this transparency with our taxpayers. Then another one that I went to had to do with curriculum as well, and it was about math. And I talked with Dave and Matt a lot about this in the car on the way back from Milwaukee, talking about teaching to the 75th percentile instead of the 25th percentile. So what they do in the school district that presented it was their goal is to get through the entire year's curriculum before the forward exam, the state testing. So that the kids have at least all been exposed to the subject matter. And then after the state testing, they go revisit the content that the kids struggled with. So it's not like they're going so fast and if you didn't get it, you didn't get it. They do have that worked into their pacing structure, but it gives the kids the opportunity to have seen all the material before they take the state test. Another thing they are doing is they make sure every kid is in their grade level instruction, but their homework is at their ability level. And so they're feeling success and they're getting the remediation they need if they are below the grade level, and it brings them up to try to catch them up. And some of the things they're doing, we are doing already in Somerset. They talked about the vertical board work, the building thinking classrooms that Don Peer and Devin McDermott presented a year or so ago. Problem solving, doing some financial, they do financial literacy at every grade level in that school district. They also identify grade levels of responsibility for mastery of certain content and skills. For example, your basic math facts with addition and subtraction, multiplication, division, fractions, different things like that. So it was really interesting. And I think anyone can go to the Wisconsin State School Board Convention 2026 and click on it. You can click on the agenda and you can look at a lot of the sessions. It's not like being there, but you can, those who attached their handouts, you can look through some of the information and at least get an idea about it. And the keynote speakers, as always, were fabulous.
Yeah, I'll just say, the first time I've gone in, the 4 years I've been on the board, and I thought it was, I didn't know what to expect. But it was well worth the couple days away. Socialization with other board members, especially the connections that Dr. Granville just knows, kind of open the conversation up and have the ability to figure out what are you doing, what are you experiencing. Good session on school safety, especially rural school safety. And it's just always nice to hear, what others are doing and what they've experienced. And then another one on kind of board governance and operations. Lots of discussion on board development. And there's so many ways to do things and get better. So I would highly encourage anybody next year, if you could figure out how to work remote or fit it in to your week, well worth attending. Yeah, two of the keynote speakers were really good. So again, very nonpartisan, just good information. Kind of surprised me and well worth the days. So.
I would agree, some really good sessions. We've all been to different conferences, right? And the breakout sessions, sometimes it's a flip of a coin. So the first day, I won't name the sessions, they weren't great. And then the second, third day, really good. So I was a little worried, but some good stuff. I focused second day exclusively on operations. So on communicating budget information. There was one on a budget scorecard. That's something I brought back to Rod. We've been talking about already. A way that we can have more high-level conversations. Like the audit, super important information, right? But really dense, heavy information, hard to grasp in one sitting. So how can we break up our financial information in more digestible chunks and then have a scorecard? Like, here's where we want to be, here's where we are. So that was a good session. Another one on more on the budgeting cycle and how to communicate that out proactively. Rod's already actually on that, working on some stuff. One of his goals is on communicating more openly with the community about what we have going on financially, so this information was helpful to him. I know this, when I go to a conference or convention, I think people back here like, oh no, he's at another conference, because you're getting ideas and you're sending them back out there like, hey, you have to look at this, hey, you have to look at this, and they just want to enjoy the couple days where I'm not here. But I don't allow them to do that. So yeah, good experience overall.
Any questions from anybody? All right, moving on. Item number 7, policies 5451.01 and 5451.02. Do you want to cover those?
Yeah, I'll cover those. We'll make up some time on this. This is just a statutory requirement. So the Wisconsin Academic Excellence Scholarship and Technical Excellence Scholarships, they are great. So it was a really, really good move by the state. Essentially says that every district, their top performing students, and there's different ways to measure top performing for academic excellence versus technical excellence, have access to a really sizable scholarship. But we have things we need to do in order to capitalize on that, and one is declare the number of scholarships available. It's not like we could say, hey, we'd love 3. Based on the size of our school, we have one, but we have to officially approve that, so that's what this is. This will come back at the next meeting for official action, but there's really nothing there. It is what it is.
Questions? All right. We don't normally do this, but does anybody need to take a quick recess before we get all these policies, or are we good, just keep pushing through?
These policies are gonna go fast, Matt.
It says 30 minutes.
If you click on the document up at the top, you'll see the working document that Danny and I and Alicia and Ed, our Neola guy, and Dr. Grambo sat in on that entire long meeting and provided really great input and advice, recommendations. And when we had questions about things, he was busy making notes about who he had to ask what. So most of these, if you just scroll through them, most of them, there really weren't a lot of changes. The definitions, there were no significant changes. The next one, board member behavior, communications, and code of conduct, there was no significant change. The consent agenda, we took all the options because at the top, the word may be included was there, so it just gave more leeway for the agendas. Unrequested leaves of the absence, fitness for duty, there was no significant change there. 2416, student privacy and parental access to information, that's just making sure that none of the data the school district collects is used for marketing or is for sale. We use it just for internal use. Summer or interim school attendance, the language that we have is regarding absences, we kept. Do you want to add anything to any of this?
I will when you get to 2464.
Okay, well, that's next. Advanced learning instruction, gifted and talented. We took both of the options under identification, and we deleted some repetitive language.
So this has been the second time for this update. We sent it back to policy committee because I was uncomfortable with it. I have done some more research, and there's a specific sentence that I'm concerned about under identification, where it says the it's just right as you keep scrolling down the document. It's policy 2464.
So it would be, it's page.
So if you have that column on the left open.
17.
You can
Oh,
click
the-
on the number and
thank
bring
you.
it right there.
Thank you, Laura.
Sorry.
I'm ready, go ahead.
Actually.
I got it.
Yep, so the little piece that well, overall, I think it's really wordy. I prefer that we don't keep it, take it. But the specific little part that I'm worried about, it says, it's under ID and it says the identification process and tools shall be responsive to factors such as, but not limited to, pupils' economic conditions, race, gender, culture. The rest of those things in that sentence, developmental differences, native language, identified disabilities, I don't have a problem with those. But what I just pointed out, the people's economic conditions, race, gender, and culture, reads to me that you're gifted considering your race. And the more I dug into it, the Wisconsin Association for Gifted and Talented has played a heavy hand in developing these updates. And there's a few things I'm uncomfortable with on their website. So I'd like to stay away from systemic racism, which is woven throughout their work, from what I have seen. So that's how I'm reading this.
So how would you,
update.
sorry, probably the same question. How would it read? What would you strike?
I would prefer not to take any of it and to
So
keep
where-
what we have, which is just the state statute language, which has the 5 characteristics that they point out in order to qualify for.
So this whole section of identification would just be,
I would
saying
You look at
anything in
the
green
whole-
would be
all
fine,
Anything in
we
green.
keep the red.
Yep. I would just, there's other school districts that haven't taken this update as well.
sorry, Carter, go ahead.
Oh, systemic racism is an obscure phrase, can you clarify what it means?
equality, whatever that means, and so that's
Yeah.
exactly right, it's subjective.
Yeah. But it highlights one versus, it's just divisive is how
Right.
I interpret it, so that's one thing, like.
And I think everything with gifted and talented should be on, merit, but merit also based on, you know, if you have, like it speaks to, if you have a learning disability, you know, if you have a native, you know, or a language that's not English, I mean, those things all do need to be taken into account.
Yep.
Can you add a copy that you would like to see? Like, can we layer that in here somewhere?
Well, it would be going back to the pink, right?
Right.
It would be, so the pink stuff, that was the previous, so it would be going back to that language.
Just keeping it.
Yeah,
So we wouldn't adopt a new one.
Correct.
right, it would be
Just
keeping.
keep that policy as is.
Yes. Cause that is just clean cut state statute language.
Okay.
I fully support what you just said, and I think it also goes directly towards, you wanna avoid confrontational topics, which I think can directly help attract more students.
Yep.
It's just a safe
You're
decision
talking
to go.
about equity, right?
Okay. Anything else on that one?
So 2464 just would not come back.
Well, I think it will come back, it should come back as this, but then it would be a vote on, do we adopt the changes or leave it as is? So the motion at that time would be to, you know, strike it from the list.
And
Yeah, and
before we do that, I would want to check with Neola and make sure that none of these changes are because of case law that has affected the state statute.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, we could bring it back to committee and then we could dig into that
Sure.
at that point.
Sounds good.
Are there any others through there, Danny, that follow
Nope.
that same feel? No?
So I just want to clarify, so we will remove this from the list, it'll go back to the policy committee. The policy that is in place today will stand. And then it'll come back once those questions are answered in several months.
Or if nothing changes, do we need to do anything?
Well, I mean, I think, well, we should have a discussion at least to say,
Yep, should come
Follow
back
up.
with the follow-up.
yeah, follow, yep, like, this is still good.
So do we need a motion for that?
Well, let's see here, because this was the first reading,
Yep.
so, yes, we have to have a motion, because because at the end of this, there'll be a motion one way or the other. So a motion just describing that, to approve the first reading of all policies other than that one, and then to suggest that that one policy goes back to committee for further review.
We don't have to approve anything tonight.
Yeah, but in 2 weeks.
Great.
Well, you technically would approve the first reading, unless, if you've not been doing that, I mean, typically, that's what would happen, you'd say, yep, we approve the first reading, so it's on record that the first reading has occurred, and then the second reading, and then the approval, but,
We've not done that.
Yeah, we
okay,
haven't done that.
okay.
If
I'm not
we are
worried about it.
going to remove one from the next meeting, I think there
There should be
should
some
be
action,
an
yeah.
official.
But being we don't have any possible action, can we just leave it? It'll come back on the agenda, somebody will make a motion to amend the agenda, or when we get to that section.
I
Do
think
we-
that's the best
do we
thing, in
need to
case
go-
anybody wants
That's
to
clear.
comment. or-
Yep.
Does it need to go to the policy committee, or can we just get feedback from them that's emailed out to everybody?
Well, the
Well-
policy committee is Danny and Lori and myself, so I'm saying, because if we want to do what Lori suggested, that we're gonna find out if there's any case law or stuff that like we have to do, we can do that research before we bring it back, and
What I
then,
mean, is that able to be done by February 16th?
Probably not.
Okay.
And I think that it's clean, right? There's record that the policy committee will look at it, it doesn't get lost.
and this is one that, there's no urgency with this, it's not gonna drastically change our practice one way or the other, so we're fine.
Okay.
The next one, 4124, notice of reasonable assurance of employment, there's no significant change there. Same with student supervision and welfare, entrance age, 5310.01, emergency nursing services and plan, the school nurse is a registered nurse. There were no significant changes to that to what our current practice is in that policy. 5411, third grade promotion and retention, at-risk students. There was a section of language added under parental notification heading. So the language in that whole big green section is exactly what is posted on our website in the Somerset Early Literacy Remediation Plan, which was approved by the board early in 2025, and it's been published on our website since June 1st of 2025. 5464, early graduation, there is no significant change there from our current practice. Academic honesty, no significant changes there. There was some language added about properly citing sources of artificial intelligence and NLP, natural language processing. 5330, student use or possession of intoxicants, drugs, or paraphernalia. There were no significant changes there. There were 2 more identifications of what's included as drugs that were taken. 6320, purchasing. Now that the referendum funding has been allocated, we've reverted back to the $25,000 limit rather than the $250,000 limit. 7440.03, small unmanned aircraft systems, drones, there were no significant changes there. 7530.02, staff and school officials, use of personal communication devices. We took option A2, it just provided some more specific language than what was in our old policy. It says exactly what individuals are responsible for retaining: text messages, instant messages, other written communications that are not archived by the district. 8120, there is some addition of language regarding a volunteer transporting students. 8395, student mental and physical health services. There was the addition of district-specific language in the first and second paragraphs that we had already had, making clear the part, well, no, this was new language, but the language that was added is district-specific, making clear the partnership between the school district and families. 8420, school safety and reporting of crime statistics. There was a final section of all new writing that had to do with the annual crime statistics reporting, and that was added as per a requirement of Wisconsin State Statute 118.124. Food services, there were no significant changes. We're keeping our district-specific language regarding negative account balances. There was a little bit of word changing when it came to, the current language was low-cost alternative, was changed by Neola to reduced price recommended by the district administration and approved by the board. So that'll be a change because it'll have to, if there's a change there, Dr. Gramble will have to bring it to the board for approval. We were required to add the name, address, phone, and email address of the food service director, so that is added in blue. And there's some added language. It was the current practice, but they added a sentence about if a request that has to do with food allergy kind of things, they need to have by their doctor, or it has to be in their IEP. And if that's not immediately available, that will honor the request if it's safely possible. Current practice, just adding that sentence to it, and that was done by Neola as well. 9151, use of cameras and other recording devices in locker rooms. No significant change to what we already have. They added a little bit more detailed language. For example, there was something in our current policy about media not going into locker rooms. They just spelled it out more detailed with another sentence or two. And then, well, that's all the policies that we currently have. Did anybody have any questions about anything?
Nope, hearing none. All right, these will all come back to the meeting in 2 weeks. And then we'll address that policy that we discussed already at that time.
So real quick, having gone through first time as part of the committee, the amount of work that Danny and Lori do on this is amazing. So we all owe them a debt of gratitude. It takes a lot of time to go through all this. It's word by word through all of this. It's a ton of time. It was fun though to dig in. We had really good conversations about policy, and it's not fun to everyone, but we all enjoy it, so that was good. And also Alicia, because she's the one that documents all this and tracks it all and keeps us on track. So big thank you to her too.
Do you want to make a comment just about the policy? You made a comment earlier about how we're so up to date on
Oh,
this stuff.
yeah.
Like,
So
I think that's interesting. For everybody
yeah,
to
it
hear.
is good. It is good to understand that the reason we were just able to go through all of that and it only took a couple of minutes is because they were minor changes, because we are so up to date on this. Not all districts will do that. Many districts will wait. They'll have a rotation cycle where things get, they let it sort of pile up a little bit, and there's nothing wrong with that. But it does end up in a situation that when you do make changes, it might be like 3, 4, 5 years worth of suggested changes. Requires a lot more conversation and things can shift a lot. By doing this annually, we're never gonna be in a position where there's gonna be something that's changing out there and we're way behind the 8 ball. So again, that's thanks to Lori and Danny.
I was on that committee 1 year. Not for me. So I appreciate all the work you do, because I know exactly what it takes.
Gotta give you credit though, you try everything.
I tried. Hours looking at these, not for me. All right, moving on. We have a B of that same topic, adoption of new policies. Lori, is this you or Dr. Grambo? Who's covering this?
I can talk about this too. So what happens with the new policies, every once in a while Neil will say, hey, here's a policy you don't have that you might want to consider. And there were several. These were the 2 that we selected. So the first one is on withdrawal and dropout from school, just needing more clarity around that process. The next one, accounting system for capital assets. I talked to Rod about this one. He read over, first of all, he said, well, that's everything we do, but it's not spelled out in policy. And it's good to have things like accounting practices spelled out in policy. Goes back to that same comment about transparency. If we can say by policy, this is what we require, we're more assured to keep it going in the right direction. So that's all in place, and like I said, Rod was comfortable with that, Jesse was comfortable with the other one.
Both of these policies, the language in them reflected our current practices.
Yes.
Okay, so those will come back in 2 weeks as well. Please dig into them since they're new. Do your research between now and 2 weeks. Bring up any questions that anybody has. Moving on, item number 9, superintendent report.
All right, so we knew this was gonna happen sooner or later, but no referendum invoices this time. We are getting right down to it, so none this time. There'll be a few more as we wrap up the final things. Next, we have the social school for EDU contract options. We have a memo attached. We mentioned this at the last meeting, or maybe the meeting before, that we're in conversation about renewal for social schools for EDU. This memo spells out that there's 2 options. Pricing is the same, not between the 2 options, same as we've had going into the last cycle. Option 1 is a 1-year contract. Option 2 is a 3-year contract. With a 3-year contract, there's the $1,000 savings annually. The nice thing is, if we would choose option 2 and go for the 3-year contract and decide only to go 1 or 2 years, all we pay back is that discount. So I would highly recommend we go with option 2. We're very pleased with our partnership with Social Schools for EDU. They've definitely enhanced our messaging. This goes right back to what we were talking about before with marketing. Part of marketing is getting out the positive message. They help us do that very, very efficiently. So it's been a very good partnership.
All right, so that'll come back in 2 weeks?
Yep.
As well for approval.
Next one, rounding. Yeah, so we just finished up our January rounding, and it was great. We had a really good time. We can open that presentation up. So rounding, if you think about like in the medical world, when doctors or nurses make the rounds, they go to their patients and they gather some vital information that they need, and they do that quickly. That's the same thing we're doing here. It's based on that model. So over the 3 sessions we had, we met with 155 staff members to gather those responses. Our goal is to identify the strengths, our opportunities for change, and then leadership opportunities. I'll talk about what that means and what we'll do with that. And then actions, 2 things. One, share out to staff and board. We're doing one of those things right now. But then probably more importantly, develop and share an action plan. So we're not just listening, we're doing something with what we listen, and that's part of the communication strategy with rounding. Go on to the next one. So what rounding looks like. I shouldn't say every district, districts that round, there's gonna be some similarities and some differences. The way we do this is we have 3 questions that we will always ask. They're the first 3 questions. What's working well as you support the learning of all your students? How could the administrative team support you and your team to be as impactful as possible? And then the third one, is there anyone that's been especially helpful to you in the last few weeks? And if so, is it okay if we share that? So first one, we want to recognize what's going well. That's the purpose of that question. Find out what's going well, do more of it. Second one, what can we do to support folks? That's obviously important for us to know. That's our number 1 job as an administrative team, supporting the folks that are working directly with kids. And then that third one is all about gratitude. Making sure we recognize that none of this happens without our colleagues working together, supporting one another. And then what we do with that third one is everyone that's recognized, we give them a card, we write out, you've been recognized during rounding by so-and-so for whatever that was, and they get that card. The next 2 questions that we asked, this gets back to that conversation about what makes us special. I think we have a really solid strategic plan. Everything in there, it makes sense. It's good guidance. But I would suggest that we could take our strategic plan and we could share it with a neighboring district and they go, that's pretty much what we do too, and share it with another neighboring district, other end of the state, and go, that kind of matches what we do too. That's not a bad thing. That's inherent in the process of creating a strategic plan because you're getting input from so many people that it ends up being kind of generalized. So we're talking about what's the next level, but what makes us special? So I don't know if you received them yet. I haven't received mine yet, so should receive them soon. You'll receive a postcard, and all residents in the district will. It's part of our census process. That's how we make sure we're finding out what kids are coming up that will eventually be in our boundaries. And we went through this process. We call it the Who We Are process. It was the admin team went through several different distillations of different information about what we think we do really well. And we landed on a phrase that we put right on that postcard. It was small town vibe, big time opportunities. And we think that really speaks to what we have here. People that are attracted to Somerset are attracted here because of the community. It's a tight-knit, close, engaged community. People like that. Our district mirrors that. The single campus, that's a tight-knit feel. There's a lot of advantage there. But we don't shortchange folks on opportunity. There's a lot of opportunity for kids. We wanted to celebrate that. These last 2 questions take that to the next level. In talking to every individual, what makes your team special? And we want to incorporate that into that messaging so we can understand that, like as an example, if we're talking to the CTE team at the high school, they do some amazing things for kids. How can we capture that and then communicate that out so people know that every single team we have, they go above and beyond. And this is not hyperbole. Our staff goes above and beyond. If you go to any activity, you can see the number of staff that are taking time to be there supporting our kids. It's everywhere, throughout every aspect of our district. And we want people to understand that because that is not the case in all districts. It's special. So that's what that question is about. And then the last question is, how can we amplify that? What can we do as an admin team to help make that even better? Is there something you want to do that you're currently not able to do? I'll share an example. So Pam in her goal structure at the elementary school, her third goal is about finding passion projects for each grade level and really advertising those and supporting them. We had the second grade team come in and they shared their partnership with Deerfield. Such a great activity, a great program, and they've got a lot of really good things going. We want to make sure that every single team at the elementary school has something like that. So we can say, you know what, if you come to this elementary school, in first grade you'll do this, in second grade you'll do this, in third grade you'll do this, and it shows the commitment to the greater community. So that's what that's all about. We meet with all staff members. We have a Google form where every one of their responses, we type in the responses as we're going. That's all captured into a spreadsheet. And then here's what we found. So the key strengths. Collaboration for students came out loud and clear. Whether we're talking about collaboration between special educators and general educators, paraprofessionals or certified staff, or within different teams, and then even between schools, which is neat. Again, because we have a campus like this, you can do that. There was a lot of support for the instructional systems that we have. People felt really supported by Sarah and her team, certainly by Jessie and her team in terms of building the supports that they need to do their job. And then this one came out loud and clear, a very student-centered culture, that people are here to do good things for and with kids. And then strong specialist and support staff partnerships. That was an important one too. It's really easy to focus on our few tested areas, but we know that although that data is super important, it doesn't measure everything we do, and our specialists and support staff are important in that equation. Then these are the primary support requests. And again, this is a high-level theme analysis, all 155. We're going to break it down by level as well, so each principal will know, well, here are the themes that are more specific to each level, because they get a little more specific if you shrink that number down. But more paraprofessional and staffing support. We know we run lean, so that's a sort of a constant pressure that folks will feel. There's a lot on their plates. This one is a neat one. Additional collaboration and planning time. Collaboration called out as the #1 strength. So what do people want? More time to do that, which is a good thing. So there, you want this pressure toward what folks already know works. They're not saying there's something broken, we need to fix it. They're saying we've got something good here, let's continue to support it. Clear communication expectations. That's something that we've been talking about a lot. Consistency and clarity. Those are two words that our admin team has been saying a lot. Very, very important, and folks appreciate it, but they want more. Continued leadership presence and accessibility. We're going to talk about this one a little bit more too, because it came out as a strength. People are saying, you know what, we're seeing the leadership team around, we're seeing people present. But when it doesn't happen, they notice it. So we can do better, and we'll continue to do that. And so I talked about that a little bit here, because it was an interesting dichotomy, that it came out as a strength and an area for improvement, almost in equal measure. So that tells us something. People really appreciate it. So we want to be more consistent with that. Like, I'll share, this is an admission, so sorry everyone. During the cold snap, I found myself not in the schools as much, and I realized after, like, wow, I found myself kind of locked in the office, because it was miserable out there, so I didn't make the walk to the schools as much. So it was nice today, a walk from 13 was able to get to all the schools. But we need to be consistent and not have that trail off. We need to make sure that our presence is always there. We can solve way more problems on the spot, working with the folks that are working with our kids directly, than waiting for an email when something goes wrong. So we'll continue to work on that. And the informal check-ins are appreciated. People like it when we're just stop by and see how things are going. Sometimes we just talk about social stuff, and then other times the work stuff emerges in those conversations too. Really, really important. And it influences morale and perceptions of support. So we'll continue to work on that. Now, what makes our kids special, or what makes our team special rather, this is good information, but this is one where a theme analysis isn't all that helpful, because it's almost more important to know what each team said. So aggregating it, it gets washed out a little bit. But kids first, that certainly everyone said that they do put kids first, and I see it every single day. Strong mutual support, that people are there to support one another. There's a commitment to student success. Way more conversations around academic excellence than I had anticipated. And not that I didn't think that that was a priority for folks, but that's not something that often comes out when we talk about what makes us special. It's usually that extra stuff, but people understood that extra stuff is only important as it also supports our students' academic improvements and gains. Positive morale and flexibility and adaptability as the other two things that made teams special. And then leadership opportunities. So this is what can we do as a leadership team to support everyone. Address the staffing capacity challenges, we've talked about that. Protect collaboration time. And when we say protect, what we mean there is there's built-in collaboration time, but it can quickly erode by scheduling things over it or rescheduling something or having more mandates on that time that limit the flexibility for staff to do what they need to do. There has to be a balance there. As we mentioned, enhance our administrative presence, and then continue to strengthen our communication. Some of that is not additional, some of it's stripping away some communication. Communication can become noise if it's too much. So making sure our communication is strategic. And then I think honestly, the most important one, continue to expand opportunities for students. We had great conversations about ideas people had for what we can do for kids that would be interesting, innovative, and yet not a big burden on the system. A lot of really good ideas came out of that. And then finally, our biggest strength, without a doubt, collaboration for students. It shined through everywhere. Our biggest areas of need, staffing and time. Again, leadership ability impacts morale. We can't forget that. Being out there, being present is super important. And instructional systems are supporting our success, which we like to hear. What we will be doing next is we'll come up with what can we do about this that's very actionable, discreet, and communicate that out to staff. We'll use a red light, green light communication strategy where the green is like, yup, you brought this up and you're right and we're gonna fix it immediately. And here are some things we're gonna do to improve it right off the bat. There's the yellow, which is really good idea, the theme is there, we're gonna work on it, but be patient because it can't happen overnight. And the red are like, yeah, we hear you, but there's really not much we can do about that. So that's how we communicate that out, and then we'll continue to do that. Moving forward, rounding will happen 2 times a year, a fall and a spring round, so this information doesn't become stale, we keep it fresh. The top 3 questions, always the same, the bottom 2 will change depending on what our initiatives are. So that is rounding. Massive thank you to the admin team that embraced this and made it better immediately. So we brought forward some ideas, and I'll share an improvement that allowed us to get to all. We're at the elementary school, and we worked through the schedule. We have the schedule up on the board, and we're picking teachers, and we're going and we're chatting with them. We hit this point where we had to meet with paraprofessionals and support staff, but they weren't available. They're working with kids. So what we ended up doing is going in a team. One would substitute for that paraprofessional, the other one would meet with them. So then we're able to get to everyone. At one point, the elementary staff helped the office staff. So Kristen and Selena would go and bring people to us. They'd say, okay, you know, you've got an opening, and they'd bring us down. So it was super, super efficient, and it was so rewarding. We left the day, each of these 3 days were some of the greatest days I've had here, because you left really engaged, connected, and feeling like, okay, we really have a good understanding of what our staff needs. And we had a lot of positive feedback from staff too, feeling heard. So we'll definitely continue with it.
What do you need from the board in terms of this? Just to listen?
Yeah, honestly, just to listen right now. Biggest challenge, staffing, and that's not something I can do. That's a conversation we're gonna have about staffing and support. An example of that is what we did already this year, where we slightly elevated the increase for special ed paraprofessionals. That will continue to be a massive area of need. When we bring salary recommendations forward, we're gonna use what McGrath had, that study that we did with McGrath. We're gonna work on getting every group to the median, and we'll have a multi-year plan to be able to do that. We're already in the process of building that. That would be an example where, yep, those recommendations will need the support from the board to chip away at those things.
Excellent. Yeah, thank you. Do we have any questions at all?
Is this new, was rounding done?
Yeah, they did rounding in the past, yep.
Any changes to the approach or?
Slight changes, nothing, So the first 3 questions were exactly the same, and those questions, they come from an organization called Studer Education. That's where this model, at least from my understanding, that's where we adopted it. It probably existed somewhere else before, but that's where we took it from. The difference structurally, I think they didn't have the full admin team doing it in the past, and it's not right, wrong, it's just we decided to go a different route because we wanted not, 2 reasons for doing that. Having all 7 members of that admin team out made it much more efficient, but more importantly, it was neat to see like Trent rounding with elementary teachers that he might not really know that well. So it creates a stronger connection between the admin team and the rest of the staff. So those would be the 2 big things that were different.
Excellent, well, we look forward to, what's next?
Excellent, thank you,
Thanks.
appreciate it.
Yep. Moving on, item number 10 is the consent agenda. Would anybody like to make a motion for any
Motion
or all
to
of this?
approve 10A, 1 and 2.
A motion by Bruce, is there a second?
Second.
Second by Danny, any discussion? All in favor?
Uh,
Any opposed? Motion passes. General information, February 16th, in 2 weeks. A reminder, our meeting will start at 5 p.m. There'll be no listening session. And then I highly encourage everybody to attend the Fine Arts Festival immediately following, right in the Performing Arts Center. District celebrations, Danny, can I start with you?
I was gone on vacation for a week and I'm so excited to be back. And it was a great vacation, but I'm here. I'm glad I didn't miss this meeting.
Bruce?
Just again, continue to try to get out and see what our students are doing. There's a lot of home activities and pretty much every night this week. There's something going on at the high school. And just seeing last week, one of the cool things, we had a dual meet Friday night, Thursday and Friday. But there was like 10 schools there that came in and went all night. The basketball team happened to show up right as we were finishing matches. And that gym got loud, kids were cheering, the basketball players just coming in to watch. I mean, we don't have a ton of wrestlers, but for the 5 matches we did have to have, all those kids cheering on, and like, some of those kids, that's probably the best they'd wrestle all year, was in front of those kids, and like, against some really good kids. So it was just fun to see the sports kind of cheering on everybody else, and everyone getting very excited for that Friday. So it was just fun to be around and see, and then everyone who's been helping clean up, set up, pick up, sell tickets, whatever. There's a lot of people around to make these events happen, including, Trent, Troy. I mean, everybody has to set up that school. I mean, any of the other teachers showing up there, I think Mike Isvanek was here 2 nights in a row until, 10 o'clock at night, locking up everything. So I mean, that's a lot of nights, a lot of time for that in addition. So thanks for all those people.
Lori, do you have your list?
Yes, I do. Bruce covered a lot of it. But the elementary school is having parent-teacher conferences next Tuesday and Thursday, so the 10th and the 12th. The dance team did well at regional. They're going to state this weekend. The high school is having academic awards in the Performing Arts Center a week from Wednesday, so we're talking about the 11th. The 3rd grade, I don't know if there's something special in 3rd grade, but they're having a fundraiser for Coco's Heart Animal Rescue. It starts on Monday the 9th and goes through the 20th, and they're having a competition about which is better, dogs or cats. The high school is having office hours on Wednesday the 11th. The middle school is having office hours on Wednesday the 25th. Lots of stuff to do and go to.
Yeah.
I think we got, Robotics team did really well this week. And Cora and Maddie, incredible job. Congratulations to all of them and their hard work. And thanks everybody for doing everything they do to give us all the information we get. It's a lot of work.
Court?
Well, we have a daughter in club volleyball, so it's been a cool experience to interact with a lot of other parents from different districts, which doesn't get to very much, and I've heard just a lot of positive stuff about our district and just kind of open conversation about, what's new, how's it going? Everybody knows Dave, all that's positive.
I don't know about that.
So far. I'm open. I tried to do it, so, all good. That's all I got.
Steve?
I think everybody's got it covered. I'm good to go. We'll pass tonight.
I will pass as well. I think everything has been covered. With that, I appreciate everybody's time tonight. Is there a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Motion by Steve, second by Corey. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes at 8:01. Meeting's adjourned.
As a reminder, in 2 weeks, I'll be virtual for that meeting. We'll be down for that school safety workshop, so, but I'll be on virtually. Jessica, nailed it. Look at that.
That should be
Success.
I don't know about that.
Well,
Originally, I was gonna have to miss
a- Oh, really?
lights were